everybody to please register. You just call the phone number that's up on the screen, and you've got to enter the event ID. And even if you are a student or a resident, please register. That helps us maintain accreditation for pediatric grand rounds. If you have any trouble, then they can come talk to you in the back. If you've never called CME before, they may not recognize your cell phone number. That's how this whole thing works. But if you have any questions, let us know. And then please don't forget to fill out an evaluation form at the end of the conference.
Right, yeah. We're ahead of time.
No, all the residents are ATLS certified, so don't worry. You're okay. Hopefully we won't get to that point. I hope not.
Before you get started, Dawn, I'd like to present you with these 2 certificates that have been sitting in our office for over a year.
Thank you. I'm so
I
honored.
can do it publicly if you like. So. I can't even remember.
That's
what they were.
hilarious.
Yes, yes.
That's from February of 20.
Yes, they've been sitting in a corner in our office, and I was going through some stuff, trying to clean stuff up, and I was like, why are these here?
It's perfect. I can show this as part of her introduction.
I'd like to present
I'll
her
get some
with
flowers and a trophy.
I'm the champion. That's pretty funny. Still a minute and a half. I like your dress. Super cute. I hear you. I pull them reason other. Like, does he have control?
That's just your first slide.
Oh, that's my first slide?
How does she get out of this? Will she need your help here? Slides are up.
What'd you do? Just do next? Oh, okay. Okay, you can turn back to the other thing. I was just curious. I was like, do I need to close out of that and open up mine? Or, okay, gotcha.
Do you have a microphone for the room?
I do. That's this one.
Yeah, okay.
I figured since we had people over there that I would go ahead and use it.
I always tell people to use it. People don't always listen to me, but I can't hear in the back of the room in here. Maybe other people can. But
Yeah, when the door is closed and I just talk to the residents, I don't ever use a microphone. But for both rooms, I think how the sound may project, it would be better.
He was like, I planned your trip, but we're going to do like 10 trips when I'm there, and then I think we might.
I know, it's hard when we normally don't start right at noon for faculty to get here and
Then we can do stuff, he said, like during the week, like at night. For
participate.
places, and we're going to just like he has a car, obviously. So we can like go places after work and stuff.
So how's Scarecrow Skedaddle planning?
so we got a meeting this morning, and they had 119 registered through the website. Then I gave them,
So it worked out so well.
probably got another 40 or 50 signed up for our clinic. So I gave them
That's
hugs,
awesome.
and then Tara's meeting with her and asking to send out reminder emails. And we're still going to sign people up until they tell us to stop. It's not 400, but
Was that your goal?
some people, that's the most we ever had for a fall run was 400, and that was back when Joanna was here and we worked really closely with the schools to get people to come. So everything has all changed. They didn't do that this year, but hopefully Currently, there's still 2 people that we think are coming that haven't registered. Maybe some of our own children.
Right.
I think last year was 1,400. Well, it wasn't huge.
Really?
It was raining,
It was a yucky day.
cold, and there are people signed up for the modified.
Good.
So that's
Good.
So,
I think 100 is great. 400's
400 was
a lot.
it was a lot. I did bring that year too. It was awesome.
Which was the 400 year? Remind me of which.
It was before we went to the Scarecrow format.
Okay.
It was here, and it's before 1 year we moved it to the baseball stadium. So it was the year before it went to the baseball stadium.
Okay.
And then, there was all this construction.
Yes.
There 1 year. That was less.
Yes.
It was back when Ed Herbert was still here as a VP and thing. Is it not?
And was it part of the
Steven
Bluegrass
was.
Half Marathon the year we
Yeah.
had
Maybe
400
it
and
was
all the
still part of
schools
Bluegrass.
came and
Yeah.
finished?
Yeah.
I feel like that one
That
was
was what it was.
okay.
They didn't want to high schools this year to do the scholarships.
What do you do?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started. If you haven't registered, the number is on the screen or in the back of the room, so please don't forget to sign in and then complete your evaluation forms. I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker today, Dr. Tuell, who I think everybody in the room knows well. She is actually a former graduate of the Tuell College of Medicine and of our Pediatric residency program. She is currently Vice Chair of Education as well as our Pediatric Residency Program Director. She has a long list of teaching and other awards that she has received during her time here at Quillen, including the Leonard Tao Humanism in Medicine Award. And October has been deemed Humanism Month here, and that is the reason and topic for her presentation today. She also has some Quillen fourth-year medical students who are going to share as part of this presentation from the Gold Humanism Society. And she is a faculty advisor for that student organization. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Tuell.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you all for having me. And I'm going to move this a little lower because it sounds really loud. Is that better? Not so loud, not so overwhelming. Okay. We are talking about humanism today, which is a topic that I am passionate about. And of course, with any CME presentation, you need to know I have no disclosures. But I am going to disclose that I'm doing this talk not as an expert in humanism, but as a fellow traveler in the journey of medicine. And I learn as I go. And some days I'm like, that was good. I made some good connections today. And other days I go, oh my word, that was awful. Hopefully I haven't scarred anyone in this room from things that you have witnessed. And then there are other days that I don't even think about humanism at all. I'm busy and I'm running around and I'm behind and I have emails to answer and texts to answer and children I'm thinking about and things to do. And those are probably the most dangerous days, right? Those are the days when I'm not reflecting on how I'm doing. I'm not thinking about how I'm taking care of patients. And so by no means am I standing up here today, I've got this all figured out. I am here today because it's something that I want to continue to develop in my personal journey, in my personal taking care of patients. And hopefully you all will travel along with me and we can help encourage each other to be better. So like any good talk, we have to have objectives. So my hope for you today is you can define humanism. What is it? What does it look like? How do we see this in everyday practice? And how can we use this in education? To differentiate between humanism and professionalism, and what's the distinction between those two? And then to demonstrate some educational techniques to foster and encourage humanism in the groups that we work with. So, I would be remiss in talking about humanism if I did not bring up Hippocrates, who here took the Hippocratic Oath when they graduated from medical school. Some sort of modified version of the Hippocratic Oath all of us have probably taken at some point, or will take, for those who haven't graduated yet, in our career. And so Hippocrates started sort of our traditions of modern medicine, and he wrote that it is a physician's duty to benefit the sick and keep them from harm and injustice. And that really are those are the founding principles for our practice of medicine today. I think another great in our history of medicine is Sir William Osler, who was a Canadian physician. Yay to the Canadians in the room. So he was one of the 4 founding physicians who started Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. And I think he's one of the most quoted physicians in history. Every time someone gives a talk, you have to quote Osler. So my quote that I picked out related to humanism, it is much more important to know what sort of person has a disease than to know what sort of disease a person has. That sometimes runs contrary to everything that we teach you, right? We give you multiple choice scenarios, you have options A, B, C, D, or E, and there is a right answer, and you need to know that. Sometimes in the practice of medicine, we don't know what a person has. But practicing humanistic care helps them know that you care about them as a person while you're trying to figuring out what's going on with their disease. And then as we move along further in the era of modern medicine, our governing bodies have gotten involved in what it means to be a humanistic physician. And you'll start to see some of the words humanism and professionalism kind of intertwined, sometimes exchanged for each other. And so our hope for today is that you can help distinguish between those two. But the American Board of Internal Medicine in the 80s started to emphasize essential humanistic qualities that they required of their candidates in order to sit for the boards. Within the field of pediatrics, we have, first, all residency have the 6 core competencies that encompass medical knowledge and patient care and systems-based practice. Professionalism is one of them. And then within the competency of professionalism, there are 6 sub-competencies in pediatrics. And if you think about all of the milestones that we plot for our pediatric residents, one of them has to do with medical knowledge, 6 have to do with professionalism, if that gives you any idea of the importance of professionalism and the practice of humanism within medicine. And then for our medical students here, the LCME, who's the licensing body for undergraduate medical education, also emphasizes the importance of a learning environment that promotes the development of attitudes, behaviors, and identity that contribute to professional formation in our medical students. In the 1980s, there was Dr. Gold. He was a pediatric neurologist, and then his wife, Sandra Gold, was had her doctorate in education. And they were at Columbia University, and they were bemoaning the direction that medical education was taking. They were concerned about over-reliance on technology, under-reliance on actual care and compassion for patients. So they started in 1998 the Arnold P. Gold Foundation. And this foundation, instead of just bemoaning the fact that things were going wrong, they did something with it and really inspired some wealthy philanthropists in the New York area to help contribute money. And through this money of the Arnold P. Gold Foundation, they established the Gold Humanism Honor Society in 2002. The Gold Humanism Honor Society is a society that inducts medical students, residents, and faculty who practice humanistic care. Since 2002, there's been over 25,000 physicians that have been inducted into the Gold Humanism Honor Society. And these are physicians who espouse the qualities of the Gold Foundation. The other thing that the Gold Foundation does is they provide grants to medical schools to help promote traditions in medicine. They believe that there's a great foundation in some of these traditions, like the white coat ceremony. Who here did a white coat ceremony? Transition to third year ceremony. I get a lot of no's over there. All of these are supposed to support and encourage humanism within our medical students, residents, and faculty. And they also support some of the faculty awards and nominations that occur as well. From the Arnold P. Gold Foundation, they have defined humanism specifically in healthcare, because you're going to find a lot of definitions if you just look in any literature anywhere. So their formal definition is humanism in healthcare is characterized by a respectful and compassionate relationship between physicians as well as other members of the healthcare team and their patients. It reflects attitudes and behaviors that are sensitive to the values and the cultural and ethnic backgrounds of others. So a very broad statement of the ideal of what a humanistic physician looks like. And then for me, I'm very kind of practically oriented, and so that's a great theory. What does it look like in real life? It sounds good. And so they broke it down into specific attributes that a humanistic provider would have. Of course, there's an acronym. You need an acronym in medicine to remember anything. However, there's so many acronyms, I can't remember what any of them mean anymore. Theirs is IE Cares, and this stands for integrity. And integrity is not just honesty, but it's a congruence between my express values and then my actual behavior. So if I say humanism is important to me, but then I go into a room and I'm rude to a patient, that's not practicing integrity. There's excellence, which is the clinical expertise piece. So if I'm a compassionate physician, but I don't know what I'm doing, I'm not really helping a patient, right? So the excellence is the clinical expertise piece that we need to provide our compassionate care. Altruism is the capacity to put the needs of another ahead of your own. Respect is a respect for human values and human life that are different from your own. Empathy is putting yourself in another's shoes. You know, what is it like to be this patient lying in the bed and 20 faces are staring at me and you want me to tell you how I'm feeling and you just woke me up? You know, being able to see our patients from that perspective is really important, and not to dismiss them as uncooperative or unhelpful, but understanding what they're going through. And then the last piece would be the service component, to use your gifts and talents for the good of others and to do so selflessly. And then as I was flipping through the Quillen News that I got last week, the president of the Gold Humanism Society was on one of the pages. So this is Sean Oceanbine, who was the president last year. He got an Unsung Hero Award for pulling a car wreck victim out of a burning car. I mean, this is altruism, right? He put the needs of someone else ahead of himself and pulled someone out of the car. I didn't know he did that. He got an award from President Noland. You know, this is an example of someone who is in the society, but I think this is reflective of the kinds of students who get elected into the society. And I have several Gold Humanism students here today. Will you all just stand up and wave? Say hi. Yes. And two of them, yay, they're wonderful. Two of them are going to help this afternoon and share a story as well. So thank you all for being here. And then the whole reason I'm doing this talk today is there were two fantastic pediatric educators who were very involved in undergraduate medical education, Drs. Miller and Sarkin. And they were so passionate, they became Gold Humanism Traveling Fellows. So they would go to institutions, they would give grand rounds on the importance of humanism in medicine. In October of 2004, they were flying to their next destination to give grand rounds, and their plane crashed and they died. And so the chair for Dr. Miller worked with the Association of Pediatric Chairs, I forget what all it stands for, but they have designated October as Humanism Month in honor of the memory of Drs. Miller and Sarkin. And Dr. Wood emailed me this, I don't know, 2 years ago. And at that point, the grand round schedule for last year was already set, and I said, okay, we'll do it next year. Which is why I'm standing here today, because I'm slightly obsessive, and if I say I'll do something, it might take me a while, but we'll get there. So this is why we're talking about humanism. We're honoring the legacy of Drs. Miller and Sarkin and of the pediatric chairs who want to use October as their chance to talk about humanism. So Dr. Carol Chow, who is at University of Pennsylvania, was very interested in this idea of humanism in medicine. And so what she ended up doing was taking a survey of the medical students and the residents at UPenn and say, hey, who do you think are really humanistic providers? So they completed the survey of who they thought were the humanistic providers, and she asked about what attributes these physicians had. Then she gathered together all of the physicians who were selected as humanistic providers and did focus groups and surveys with them, asking them, what kind of attitudes do you have? How do you stay humanistic? What kind of practices do you have outside of medicine? And we're going to go through some of the results of her studies, but this is the first piece that she found, the attitudes of the humanistic physicians. So they approach patients with a sense of humility and curiosity, particularly towards patients whom are deemed difficult to relate. We all know those patients who come into the hospital with those reputations or develop those reputations within a few days of being here. And these physicians took it as their particular curiosity. What's going on with them? Why are they being difficult to relate? What can I do to help meet them where they are? When they treated patients, they treated the patients how they themselves would want to be treated. And granted, we're not pediatric patients, but how would we want our children or nieces or nephews or grandchildren to be treated? And then I think an important thing too is that they saw their role as not merely taking care of the medical aspect of the patient, but also to help their patients through life struggles. If you're sick enough to be in the hospital, I'm sure that has significant impacts on your family and your work life and everything else that's going on in your life. So they saw it as their role not to just prescribe a medicine, but to see what else is going on, what is stressing your family out, why aren't you able to do what we've been talking about over the past few months. And so to give us an example of humanism, we have Rebecca Ralston, who is a fourth-year medical student. She is entering into the match in OBGYN. She was in Washington, D.C. last year working on her master's in public health at George Washington University. And so she's going to come up and share an example of humanism in real-life practice.
Thanks, Dr. Tuell. So this is not a pediatric story, but Tatiana's will be a pediatric story following this. It's also not an OBGYN story either. This was the first day of my rural primary care healthcare week, and my second patient of the day taught me a lesson that will continue to affect the practice of medicine through the duration of my career. Within 1 minute of entering the room, this patient, I'm by myself, and he expressed to me that he just got out of prison. And I think I'm fairly strong, but I was scared, and I desperately wanted to exit. He was an intense-looking fellow, and so rather than leaving like I really wanted to, I stayed, and I sat there, and I listened to him. And he explained to me that he just got out of prison, And that wasn't his first time. He'd been in jail and prison, basically since the age of 15, on and off, for lots of different reasons. And so I sat there, and he talked to me about his health concerns. He talked to me about his countless suicide attempts, his incarcerations, his reasons for his incarcerations, and also his current living conditions. I was in awe of his willingness to so freely talk about these things with me in such sensitive subjects, and I was in awe of the devastation of so much of the history he provided. I listened as he proudly told me about the tent that he lives in behind Target, and then also how proud he was that his tent area was the cleanest in his entire tent community. I listened as he described his various suicide attempts, and I was very saddened by the story he told me in which he attempted to overdose on Humanism so that it would burst every blood vessel in his body and kill him, he said. I was honored to be the provider for whom he so proudly told the only illicit drug he uses is marijuana. And he said that he quit using other illegal drugs. He also quit abusing alcohol, tobacco, and prescription medications. We talked about impulse control, mental health resources, and employment opportunities. So he presented for an employment clearance for work. But he enriched my education by allowing me really the first opportunity to talk to and get to know the human behind the bars, who we often so often forget in society and forget the stories of these people. He is a man struggling with severe mental health disease and lack of access to mental health help and nearly constant problems with the law. He was a man who was hoping to improve his life and his contributions to society by looking for a job. And so I was honored to be the provider for which he let this shine through. He is a human, and I learned early on that Wednesday morning the degree to which genuineness and respect can impact the patient care, the patient, and the provider on a very personal level, and can change the life of a provider or future physician. I discovered in these moments a more tangible meaning of the word humanism. Humanism is a large part of medicine, and it's often difficult to remember that or be encouraged by that when we're out in practice, or at least sometimes I have trouble with that. But I strive to always practice the words of Maimonides. The physician should not treat the disease, but the patient who is suffering from it.
Thank you. And, hearing from students and residents, their journey and impactful moments in medicine helps inspire me and keep me going in what I do, and know that we are all working on this together and can encourage each other. And if you think about humanism and what Rebecca was saying, it really does impact patient care. There are multiple studies that show patients who have a humanistic provider have better outcomes, whether it's they have chronic hypertension, they have better control of their blood pressure. If they have diabetes, they have better control of their blood sugars. They're more likely to actually comply with what their physician is recommending rather than someone who they feel like does not care about them. For patients who have humanistic providers, they're more satisfied with their care. They feel like they were heard. They feel like their needs were met. And a study that I found fascinating was that in patients who have a cold, an upper respiratory infection, if they felt like their provider was empathetic, it was a significant predictor in decreasing the duration and severity of the common cold. How is that possible? Our immune system and our neuroendocrine system are so interconnected that if you have a decrease in release of your stress hormones, you can decrease production of pro-inflammatory cytokines and interleukins and actually change something like a cold. That's crazy to me. We're as good as chicken noodle soup. So there's a great reason to really work on these skills. And some people will say, you are who you are. If you're not nice, you're just not ever going to be nice. Or if you're not humanistic, you're not ever going to be humanistic. There is hope, and that's actually not true. There are some specific skills that we can teach, and we're going to go through that. But first, we're going to talk about some common barriers to humanism in everyday clinical practice. Rebecca alluded to a few of those. What are some ideas of common barriers to humanism? You all get to talk too, it's not just me. Busy schedules, absolutely. And I get the AOA Journal, and it's a quarterly publication that has different poems and narratives and pictures and stuff like that. I think it's hard. Can you all see this fairly well? So this is a history of medical care. We start in the Roman times. We have the Roman physician looking in the mouth of the soldier. We move through the Dark Ages and the Renaissance ages, and we have George Washington, Abraham Lincoln. We have some introduction of some machines here in the 70s, and then we have modern day medicine. This picture here, there's no physician. Where'd we go? Technology is amazing and fascinating, and oh my word, we're almost at the point of like cloning people, and machines are getting smarter and smarter. We could work ourselves out of a job if machines can do what we can do, but the difference between us and a machine is that we can practice compassion and humanism. And the good news is there was a recent study that compared physicians to computers in diagnosing conditions, and the physicians actually won. It's because they could pick up some of the nuances in the history and the story that a computer can't quite account for yet. So we're still valuable. We're not taken over by machines yet, but technology is amazing, but also can be a problem. All right, what about this? What do you think this is representing? So we have a conveyor belt, right? On the conveyor belt is my lineup of patients in the morning. I have my ACE timer going. I get 15 minutes, not 20 minutes. Just subtract 5 from there. Just put them on a conveyor belt. You've got your 15 minutes. Your 15 minutes is done. They're out of the room. You better be done. What does that represent? Real life? The business of medicine? We need to make money to keep our clinic doors open, to pay our nurses, to pay our physicians. Volume matters, RVUs matter, how much money we're generating matters. Darn, that's hard, right? 15 minutes, let me meet your needs and find out your drug abuse history and your housing situation and what's happening with grandma and the family's in the middle of a divorce or whatever it is. That's really hard. And this is what modern medicine is being conveyed as. People are on a conveyor belt. You got your time, got to go. Okay, this is my next one. What's this? Electronic medical records. Oh my goodness. I've complained a time or two myself. They're so challenging. And this, I think, is a picture of what our patients feel like. Does he look like he's connecting with his physician? No. He's looking at his watch like, what am I going to get out of here? Because this is a waste of my time. This is what we have to deal with. And our electronic medical records, they can be cumbersome. I've gotten to where I can type without looking at my computer. But the problem is, when I have to click on a box, I have to look at the computer. So I can type a little bit of an HPI in a room, but that's the extent of what I can do. And sometimes I have to hold the computer in my lap so I can look at the patient, but sometimes I have to just put it down. Be like, okay, let's put this aside. Talk to me. What's going on? And that's hard.
What do you think of taking notes and then write down?
There are some people who do that, who will take notes and then enter the information to the computer later. With my conveyor belt of every 15 minutes, when I wait to enter things later, I don't remember except the few highlights I might have jotted down. So, it's developing that style and the comfort of I feel okay with the computer in the room, or no, it's too much of a distraction. I don't want it in the room with me. I'd rather take notes and enter in something later. Some people are using scribes in medical practice because it's really hard to be able to connect with the patient and take notes and write on a computer or do whatever else you're trying to do. So it's figuring out what resources do you have, how you can use your time, and how you can actually connect with the patient while you're accomplishing what needs to be accomplished. Here's the next one. So this was in the New York Times, this article, Doctors Bad-Mouthing Other Doctors. And it was a study in the Journal of General Internal Medicine or something along those lines. And what they did, researchers hired 3 trained actors to portray standardized patients who had advanced lung cancer. And so their story was they've just moved to town. They were coming with their medical records from other providers. In the medical records was basically reflecting the standard of care for treatment of advanced lung cancer. And so the actors carried their medical records with them into these different doctor offices. The majority of the doctors had something bad to say about the care that was given by the other doctors. Yes, offered their opinions unsolicited, said, I wouldn't trust that guy, that was awful, whatever. Sometimes doctors have trouble being nice to other doctors. Sometimes they don't have, sometimes they do. I don't know, is it the competitiveness in training? Is it that physicians are just frustrated, and when you're frustrated, you have a hard time regulating what's coming out of your mouth? I don't know, but these are, I just tried to look in the press of things that were, would be coming through and things that would be an impediment to our pursuit of humanism in practice. And then the other big topic in lay literature and medical literature is the disruptive physician. It now has a title, basically a physician with bad behavior is what it is. 95% of physicians deal with disruptive physician behavior on a regular basis. That's pretty much all of us in the room. Disruptive physician behavior could be the category of yelling at people, being disrespectful to people, demanding their way, not working well with others, being demeaning to staff. 60% of the respondents to this survey said they were aware of potential adverse events that may have occurred as a result of disruptive behavior. So if you tell somebody, I'm concerned about their blood pressure's dropping and you're going to get yelled at, you're going to be less likely to say something, even though you actually are concerned. So disruptive physicians promote an environment of fear of speaking up, fear of saying, hey, I'm worried about this or that happening. 90% of nurses, physicians, and administrators witnessed unprofessional physician behavior. There are training classes for administrators in healthcare on how to deal with disruptive physicians. And then almost a third surveyed said they knew of a nurse who'd left their organization because of a physician's behavior. So we do have some issues that we need to work on, and we need to figure out how to get back to the heart of medicine, how to get back to what brought us here to begin with. Another headline that caught my news that said, if I wanted to make money, I would have been a UPS driver. So, physicians are no better than UPS drivers. I was like, that's interesting. So what this particular blogger did was took a look at the physician, which is your earning potential after high school. The physician is red. Then he took a look at just a standard UPS driver and their earning income potential starting after high school. So they have earnings that start at 18 years of age. And you see their earning trajectory goes up. At the end, they make less than a physician, right? Your earning income potential is much higher as a physician. But then they calculated in green, if the UPS driver worked physician hours, the income potential is exactly the same. So if anyone is tempted to quit, work overtime at UPS, you could very well make a similar amount of money in the long run. So, these are the kinds of headlines and articles and popular press that's out there that's inundating us every day as we're trying to trudge along and do good and keep up the good fight. And then we also have the issue of the hidden curriculum. And the hidden curriculum is the distinction between the formal curriculum, so you're on a rotation or you have a class, here are your specific goals and objectives and your reading that you want to do, and here's what we're going to test you at the end of the day, versus the hidden curriculum, which is more the day in and day out activities, your formation of your identity as a professional, and what goes on in this workspace and in real life and not just in the classroom. So this is known as the hidden curriculum. Oftentimes in the medical literature, it's portrayed as being against humanism, and there's a fair amount of literature that talks about the decline in empathy, the decline in humanism at the start of your third year of medical school. The third year of medical school is when you start working with real doctors, right? What is it that we do? What is it that you see in us that leads to this decline, that contributes to this hidden culture of what's out there? And I think the other part of the overt curriculum in medicine is that our assessment is going to drive your learning. So for our pediatric residents, they have a test every month, right? So I'm assessing their medical knowledge every month. So what do they do every month? They study, right? So they know I'm assessing it, so they're going to prepare and they're going to study for it. Right? So assessment is going to drive learning. What I'm assessing is telling you that's important to me, okay? So assessment's going to legitimize the subject. It sends the message, these skills, this knowledge base is important, and it assures the assessment of essential skills. So what are things that we assess in medical education? Licensing exams, shelf exams, GPAs, class rank. OSCEs do get at some of this, right? But right now I'm looking at resident applications. How much information do you think I get that reflects someone's humanism or professionalism? Their personal statement, which may or may not address some of those issues. So personal statement, maybe. They all, letters of recommendation, all say everyone is wonderful. Everyone is wonderful, gonna be a great doctor, love to work with them, highly recommend them. I've read very few bad letters of recommendation. And that was worrisome if there's a bad letter of recommendation. If it's good, you're in with everyone else. So when you look as a student or as a resident and you get to be a board certified pediatrician by taking a test, right? You get to be a licensed physician by passing a series of 3 exams. None of these are saying to you, it is so important how you communicate with a patient. It is so important that you practice humanistic medicine because that impacts a life. That impacts the care of a patient far more than you saying, viral bronchiolitis, no antibiotics, move on to the next patient. You meeting and connecting to these patients makes a difference, but unfortunately in medical education we don't show you that very often, which is why we're here today. Okay, the other piece that I discussed in the objectives that we were covering today is the distinction between professionalism and humanism and how they can be interchanged and that kind of thing. So Dr. Stern wrote a book measuring medical professionalism, and he gave a definition which includes the words professionalism in it, which drives me a little crazy, but this is what it is. So professionalism is demonstrated through a foundation of clinical competence, communication skills, and ethic understanding upon which is built the aspiration to and wise application of the principles of professionalism, excellence, humanism, accountability, and altruism. So we see there's overlap, right? So they're saying professionalism encompasses humanism. So what exactly are we looking for when we're saying we're measuring professionalism? I already mentioned that within pediatrics, we have 6 subcompetencies or milestones that are looking at professionalism within medicine. So the first one we look at is whether our residents are empathetic providers. Do they have a sense of duty and accountability to their patients and society? Do they have high standards of ethical behavior? Are they self-aware? Are they trustworthy? Do others feel secure when they're signing out to them and they're going to take over care of their patients? And are they able to accept some of the ambiguity associated with taking care of patients? The LCME says that medical students need to be trained in a professional environment. So it is important. So in thinking about this, professionalism is a way of acting. That's your observable behaviors. Humanism is your set of beliefs that drive those outward behaviors. So I can measure your professionalism. Did you show up on time? Were you in professional attire? Did you comply with HIPAA regulations? Did you complete charts in a timely manner? Did you return emails? Those are outward actions, but what drives those actions are your internal thought beliefs. Your thought patterns are going to drive your actions. And so Jordan Cohen, in his paper in Academic Medicine a few years ago, made the distinction that professionalism is a way of acting and humanism is the deep-seated values and convictions. And so his kind of summary or point of the paper was that humanism is going to be the passion that animates professionalism. So it's really hard to maintain professional behaviors if you don't have that underlying set of beliefs and values and convictions that this is actually important. So what happens if we just focus on professionalism, say you need to act like a professional, most likely those professional behaviors are going to happen when you're being watched, right? Well, no one's going to notice if I'm on call at night and I go to the grocery store and get my snack for the night because no one's here. That would be considered unprofessional behavior, right? But if no one knows, the person who doesn't have those humanistic values underneath would be okay with that. And so, we see examples of this, a physician who acts really nice to the patient in the room, and then they go outside and, can you believe that? They're blah, 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 whatever it may be, mock the patient outside of the room. Or the physicians who are really nice to the students or residents, and then they turn around and yell at somebody because they didn't get them what they wanted the second they wanted. So we see this discrepancy in behavior all the time, and I think that's part of what leads to this confusion and the erosion of empathy of, people act like this, I see that, it must be okay. But when you develop those deep-seated beliefs, you feel more comfortable with saying, that's not okay, and that's not how I want to be. And so professionalism kind of erodes when we get a little bit stressed, when we get tired, when things are chaotic. And how often is that a day in the life of medicine? Chaos, running behind, 5 people want something from you all at the same time. And that's when you start getting irritable and short with people, and patients are a problem instead of why you're actually there to work that day. All of our busyness and lack of self-care contribute to our burnout, which also contributes to our lack of empathy when we deal with our patients. So, I have up here, can you go through the motions without foundational virtues? Any parents in here? A few. So I can tell my kids all the time, this is wrong, you can't do it. But unless they have a heart attitude that actually believes me, they're going to act right when I'm sitting right beside them. But when I leave, they're not going to do what I want them to do because I've just enforced a behavior and I haven't changed their heart. It's the same way with you have to be professional if you don't have the heart to go along with being professional. And Marcus Aurelius said, benevolence is invincible if it be genuine, but not merely an infected smile and playing a part. So, when things are going well, it's okay, I can act professional. But when things aren't going well, that's when we start to see the real me coming out. And that's when we need those humanistic values to sustain us during times of stress. And I was flipping through the internet. Patience. What you have when there are too many witnesses, right? And this one. I'm sorry, but I'm all out of nice today. Try another day, because I'm done. So, our ultimate goal is a combination of professionalism and humanism. Patients want a physician who is a master of their craft and who cares deeply about them. They want them both. That's what they need. They want competency and caring, professionalism and humanism, both. So, for the last 10 minutes or so, we're going to talk about some behaviors to help promote humanism, and we're going to have Tatiana share in just a moment as well. So just so you know, good things are happening here. Last spring was Solidarity Day. It was a national day celebrated by all the Gold Humanism chapters, and once again, flipping through the Quillen news, here's a picture of 30 of our Quillen ETSU students who delivered carnations to patients at the medical center and at the VA, just to say, hi, we're thinking about you. I'm sorry, it has to be hard to be in a hospital. They didn't go in and do a medical interview or anything like that. They just gave them a flower, told them that someone cared about them. And that's Solidarity Day. If anyone's interested, happens every spring, and we usually do something related to that. And here is a video from the Cleveland Clinic series. I don't know if you all have seen this. Do I have volume, Brian? Well, I just paused. There was music that went in the beginning. You should hear music. It helps make it more meaningful. Is the speaker plugged in? Apparently had to wiggle it. And that really was just such a powerful video to me to show, just remind you that everybody walking through these halls, everybody that you see going up the elevator, down the elevator, passing in the cafeteria, they have their own life story. And so often we dismiss people, or we're busy in our own world and with our own lives and frustrations and our own little thought bubbles going on in our head, that we forget what it's like to be the patient or to be in a hospital, or what all people are going through as they're here. And so one thing we want to think about is how can we practice this skill a little bit better? And Dr. Miller, the one who we mentioned at the beginning of the talk, wrote a paper on the habit of humanism, a framework for making humanistic care a reflexive clinical skill. How nice if you didn't even have to think about it, that it was just reflexive. And his argument was that you can develop a habit of humanism, and it can also be taught. And there were basically 3 key components to practicing humanism. The first was to identify the perspective of the patient and their loved ones, right? So definitely in pediatrics, it's not necessarily always the patient's perspective. We need to know the family's perspective. We need to know the perspective of the healthcare provider, and then take time to reflect on how these perspectives converge and how they conflict. Because oftentimes my perspective is much different from that of a family member. And then choose to act altruistically by endorsing and understanding the perspectives of the patient and the family. That doesn't mean that you agree with them all the time, but that you understand that they have a different perspective, and how can we come together for that shared perspective. And I think the key point there is that time to reflect. How often do you take time to think about, what is a patient thinking, what am I thinking, and how are they different, and how are they the same, and how can we come together to make this work? You don't have a whole lot of time to do that. But if you make it a regular practice, it can work. And so I put up this lovely picture of a reflection as we think about how important that is. And Tatiana is going to give us a reflection of a patient encounter she had. And Tatiana's going into pediatrics. She's applying in the match right now.
So I'm Tatiana. I'm a 4th-year medical student here and a member of the Gold Humanism Honor Society. And I'm really excited to tell my story because it's one of my favorites. I think my husband's heard it like 5 times. And I want to start off by saying that I've had a lot of great examples of humanism in the pediatric department here with the residents and with the physicians for sure. But the story I'm going to tell today came from a different pediatric experience in the office of Dr. Leslie Taylor, our wonderful pediatric surgeon here. So I was working with Dr. Taylor at the very beginning of my 3rd year. I had just sort of taken step 1, and I was just entering Dr. Taylor's office as a student. And we had a patient come in. He was a 3 or 4-year-old boy, and his mom was from Guatemala, Spanish-speaking only. And I have a background in medical interpreting, so I was functioning as an interpreter as well in this scenario. And something that we found, well, this child was very ill, I should say. He had been born with a diaphragmatic hernia. He needed ECMO at one point. He had many subspecialists and had needed many follow-up appointments. And something we learned while talking with her was that the mother was extremely frustrated, extremely remorseful about the fact that they had missed several subspecialist appointments. They had missed several follow-up studies, due largely to a lack of communication. She often felt embarrassed. She didn't want to look ignorant or disrespectful by questioning physicians, so she often wouldn't ask for clarification when she needed it. So because of this, she had missed many subspecialist appointments, she had missed many follow-up studies, and she had been written off by many of her physicians, of her son's physicians, as non-compliant or a negligent mother. And she was very tearful about this and very upset. So after the actual physical exam was over and Dr. Taylor's recommendations had been given, we all stepped outside the room. And she said that if I wanted, the next several patients were, I believe, umbilical hernias, and she said if I wanted, it would be a good idea for me to work with this mom for however long it took to sort of get all of this care plan figured out with her. So she let me step away with the patient. We made several calls to her various subspecialists, sort of rebuilt a few bridges, set up follow-up appointments within the month for the child's various appointments that he needed. We also found that the child was behind on an x-ray, so we went ahead and figured that was something we could do quickly, so we got an order in for that. We had good instructions about how she could come across the street here, get that x-ray done, what that would look like, that process would look like, how she would get results, etc. And at the end of this entire experience, she was very thankful to Dr. Taylor and to the whole team. She had tears of relief that finally she had sort of a plan that she understood for her son. She had a better understanding of what her son was going to need over the next month. And I really felt that in that experience, the residents that were working with me and Dr. Taylor and myself, we'd really made a difference in the way that patient was going to interface with the future of her son's medical care and physicians in the future. And obviously that's a very busy service, and we all have very busy services. But it was great to see how whenever you have a big team around you, sometimes that can be burdensome because it takes almost more time to see a patient. But sometimes when you have a big team like that, we can actually make those really big differences in our patients' lives. And I'm sorry to say that I remember very few medical details of this particular case or that particular rotation, but I will always remember this story, and I will always remember just how great it felt to really look at our patients as an entire family and look at their human needs right now. You know, considering that she came from a rural area of Guatemala, had never even seen a big medical center in her life, let alone imagine that she'd have a son with so many complications and so many medical needs in the future. It was great to sort of take a step back and do what we did in that particular case. So that's my story.
Thank you, Tatiana. And I also worked with Tatiana in the nursery and often used her as my interpreter. She was much more personal than the little computer that we have to use. And one of my lifelong goals is to learn to speak Spanish, so hopefully I can do that one day myself. So the last few minutes, we want to talk about how to use some educational tools to help promote the humanities. One, or humanism, and one is to use humanities. And the cool thing about humanities is that it really instills a feeling for the human condition. When I was saying, oh, we need the music to go with my video, music and art, nature, those kinds of things really help bring us all back together. They help ground us in the same framework, help remove hierarchies of who I am or what I do, and help us have different perspectives in life. And I already talked about William Osler, and he spent 30 minutes of non-medical literature reading every night before going to bed, just to help keep himself grounded. Then I was looking for a painting done by a physician. Has anyone seen this painting before? Sir Luke Fildes. This was in 1890s, thereabouts. And he painted this picture here. And 14 years before he painted this picture, his son had passed away. And so in this picture, what do you see? So you see a sick child here, and this man, I would say, would be a pediatrician, right? Because the age of the patient, maybe a family practitioner. What kind of look do you see him giving this child? Yeah, he looks concerned, he looks worried. He looks very vigilant, like he's watching very closely, and he's present. I imagine that would be the dad standing in the back corner, and there is the physician watching over this very sick child. Does she die? Does she not? We don't know, but he's present. You sense the physician's presence there. So often we want to hide behind our labs or our x-rays or our computers and not physically be present anymore because that's uncomfortable. We can't fix that necessarily. But I think this image of a man who already lost a child shows the importance of our physical presence and interaction with our patients. And if you have any interest in pursuing more of the arts and humanities, we have a physician artist who's here at ETSU tonight and tomorrow night. So check your emails if you want to go. Just a free ad. The other New York Times article that I thought was very insightful, Doctor, Shut Up and Listen. You see she has her stethoscope in her ears using her most important tool, and you see the patient over there like, oh, is she going to listen to me? Great article. You all read it. I like those fun short reads. And the last few pieces for ourselves as we try and figure out how do we make it in this world, in this journey, in the practice of medicine, is we need to be humanistic to ourselves, acknowledge that yes, we are not perfect. We make mistakes. We're uncomfortable with uncertainty, and that is okay. And it's our job as educators to accept and share our own vulnerabilities and our own uncertainties and how do I deal with this, and take time to nourish ourselves. And everybody has a different look of what that nourishment may be. I say my running in the morning is therapy for me, but other people, that would be torture for them. So one size doesn't fit all. Figure out what it is that you need to help keep yourself going. And then take time to be reflective. I tell you, I love what I do because in the teaching role, I get to work with people who are fresh and aren't jaded, who aren't cynical, and will ask me questions. I'm like, oh, I never thought of that, and have a different approach to patients, and I love that. It keeps me fresh. So practicing with others who are young and learning is exciting, and practicing your own mindfulness or spiritual practices or whatever it may be, and then seeking to have a connection with your patients. It often feels like you don't have time to do that, and I've been doing primary care for 12 years, and every family that I see, I'm like, oh, they're the sweetest family. This has happened, and this has happened. And, just over the course of time, you develop those relationships, and it really helps me keep going in what I do. And balance is so important between your work life and your home life, and then your work life and your work life. So are you doing at work the things that you enjoy doing? That's important to achieve as well. So we're going to move on to the practical humanism since we are right at time. Use your patient's name, not their room number, not their disease process. Get to know their story, practice active listening, step into their shoes, work on communication skills, they matter, and then stay human yourself. Nurture your connections with friends and families or nature or whatever it is that keeps you going. And just get rid of all of that internal clutter that is so distracting. And here's my centering family that keeps me going. So thank you all, and go forth and be humanistic. Questions? Great. Have a good day.